Hello, what I would like to do in this presentation is to introduce the topic of big data and agriculture, which is going to be the topic for my seminar in February. Why am I looking at this? Well, new technology is coming in all the time. This time last year I was talking to a guy who worked at a fruit importer, and he was involved in sort of quality assurance and taking samples of avocados that were coming into the factory, and explained to me that in a couple of years' time there would be that there were new machines coming out that could scan the fruit as they came in, and they were basically able to get a measurement of the sugar content of every single avocado entering the factory. And this is just an example of how new technology is making more and more data available throughout the food chain, not just on farms, but throughout the food businesses and also in the wider economy as well. And there's also environmental pressures, particularly on agriculture, where farming is under pressure to reduce its environmental impact. Yet at the same time, the FAO predict that by 2050 the world's population is going to be 9.6 billion, and that's going to mean that we're going to have to produce 70% more food in order to feed all the extra mouths. So the pressure is on to produce more with less, and using better use of data and better targeting of resources is seen as the way to do that. Data can help reduce the use of fossil fuels, could also help in terms of reducing food waste. There's also economic pressures and economic volatility. Again, this is going back to resources and input costs. Can better use of data help to make better use of inputs and improve economic performance? There's also a social aspect to this as well. Consumers want to know more and more about how their food is produced. So, could improving data collection help provide the sort of information that they're interested in? Things like going back to the environmental information, potentially sort of animal welfare information. So again, improving data management and data collection can help make that connection with consumers, and also for policy making as well. Policymakers have always wanted better data in order to help shape policy. The data itself here, anything you can measure, anything that can be measured on a farm is being collected. More new services are coming out that are offering equipment in order to help take and measure all aspects of production, and there's just some examples here. Going down the list, obviously, weather is an important thing in agriculture, soil, pest, diseases. The whole range of factors which impact on production. And you also need to consider, however, how data is used. One way of visualizing this is the decision action cycle, or sometimes called an OODA loop. Essentially, you make an observation. You take an observation. You get a new piece of data, or a new piece of information. You then have to orientate yourself to it, or to basically try and understand or analyze what it actually means and what it means to you. So, for example, a new piece, if you take soil samples across a field, that's new data, new observations. You have to decide then, you have to decide what it actually means to you, and make it in terms of the following crop. You have to decide what course of action you're going to take in terms of what nutrients you're going to apply, and act upon that. And that actions that you take then, of course, feed back into the system and back to samples that you might take the following year. So it's a continuous cycle, a decision action cycle. And looking at the technology that's becoming available and used in this sort of realm of big data and precision agriculture, you can sort of group bits of the technology together. So, for example, satellites, remote sensors, and so on, drones. They're all bits of kit that actually help with the observations and actual data collection. Whereas then computers, tablets, and the software part of things, the IT component of it, they're the bits of kit that help with the orientation and with analysis and providing a sort of visual interpretation of the data. And at the other end, you have variable rate technology, things that actually help you to use that data and perhaps to vary inputs across a field, or to actually take action as a consequence of gaining this data. The bit that's missing in the technology side perhaps is the decision bit, which is still very much driven by a human input. An important thing to consider with any new bit of technology is adoption, the sort of adoption rates across the industry. The USDA have recently completed a survey of US crop farmers, and this chart shows the rates of adoption of precision agricultural technologies on corn farms. And as you might expect, you can actually see that the larger farms have been the quickest to adopt some of this technology. 48% of farms have adopted yield monitors and yield monitoring. However, that 48% actually accounts for 70% of the cropland acres. So it's the larger farms that have adopted this technology so far. But what you can also see as well, yield monitoring is obviously the observation part of the system, whereas variable rate technology and guidance systems and that, they'd be more towards the act end of the cycle. And you can see that there's somewhat of a lag with whilst farmers are quite into the yield monitoring, variable rate technology is yet to sort of take off to the same extent. So perhaps there's a lag in the way, whilst lots of information is being collected, there's perhaps somewhat of a lag in terms of how it's actually used. So what are the issues with big data? Well, costs and benefits. The cost of the equipment has come down, but it's still not clear as to actually what the real benefits are. The USDA have found that on average, corn producers using precision agricultural technology, their cost of production are generally lower than farmers that aren't using it. However, they do tend to be the bigger farmers. So that there still needs to be some analysis as to the actual benefits of this. And there's also a question about platforms and applications. Which ones are going to have the most longevity? For example, there's a lot of people into drones at the moment. However, over time, will satellite imagery become much better and much and perhaps cheaper in terms of actually collecting data? So there's a question about sort of which platforms will emerge as the most economical. There's also some questions about ownership of data and also security. Some people have expressed concerns about the involvement of some of the large input suppliers, and in terms of having sort of copyrights on data collected on farms, and also the issue of security with some very high-profile cases of hacking into the IT systems of companies like Yahoo and so on. How secure is data, some of the farm data being collected, and also are we sort of putting ourselves at risk of cyber attack? Are there issues in terms of food security? So some of the key questions I'm going to try and tackle at the seminar. To what extent can new data technologies help meet the growing demand for food? How could farmers make the best use of new data technologies? Now, how can there's lots of different services and products coming onto the market, but what are the best options, and what's the sort of best strategies for farmers in trying to exploit some of this technology? What are the factors which influence adoption? I think it's perhaps important from a sort of policy or consultant's point of view. What are some of the things some of the things that are actually going to help drive the technology forward and help with adoption. What business models should agricultural consultants and advisors adopt to exploit the technology? There's a lot of people getting involved in the business of big data and agriculture. A lot of startups coming in, particularly with drones. There's been some sort of forecasts about how drone technology, drone services to agriculture will sort of grow rapidly. But at the other end as well, you have big input suppliers being involved, the ag engineers and so on. There's a lot of different people doing a lot of different things at the moment, but so it's a very the sector of big data services to farming is very fluid at the moment, and will new business models evolve out of that? I think it's quite an important thing in terms of how we provide, perhaps in the future, consulting to farmers, and how best to use the technology. And also, what are the issues around the ownership of data and security, and how can farmers' interests be safeguarded? As I mentioned, there are concerns about some of the copyright issues and data privacy with increased collection of data on farms. So in terms of the methodology, I'm going to try and sort of use. Essentially, just going to do case studies. Going to look at a range of applications across the crop sector, the livestock sector, and also in the food chain as well, just to see how farmers are starting to use the technology, and to do sort of a desk-based research on some of the issues are raised in terms of data privacy and security and so on. And that's really it for the introduction. If you have any questions, just please post them onto the forum, and thank you for listening.